Sometimes some of you will remember the famous words of Isaiah 11, verse 6, where the prophet describes a beautiful picture of an ideal future of peace and harmony for the world that matches the will of God. And Isaiah then says, "And a little child shall lead them." You know, those words begin to reverberate within us when we approach the Advent and Christmas season and begin to remember the birth of Jesus into this world. With that thought in mind, let us hear the true story of one little boy named David Littleton and see if he can lead us to an insight that we can share this morning. Some years ago, David Littleton lived in the Midwest and was blind since infancy. His family never gave up searching for the development of a new insight in medical science that might give him back his sight. And then a surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital came up with an answer, a possibility for David to receive his sight back. Not back, but for the first time. There was a windfall of support from family and church and other friends as they gave generously toward the family's expenses to travel to the Boston area, the surgery, the meals, the lodging, and the expenses of David's long recuperation. Finally, all the preparations were made to leave and go there, and David and his mother were all packed, ready to go, and as they were saying goodbye to some other members of the family, his mom noticed that David had tucked his old teddy bear under his arm. Old teddy bear had seen better days, some stuffing popping out of his shoulder or a broken seam. One ear was seriously chewed, and an eye was missing. David's mom was first to say, "Why take the old teddy bear? When we get there, we'll buy a new one for you." But, so David took his let me just say, some of you may be young enough still, if not in age, then in spirit, to know that would never do. It had to be this teddy bear, and no other. So David took his much used, much battered, chewed teddy bear with him to Boston, and in the hospital, he had his teddy bear tucked under his arm, even in the waiting line for the operating room. Through the long period of post-operative recovery, teddy bear never left his side. It's a hard story for me to tell, because it starts to well up inside. Then came the day when the bandages were removed. David Littleton could see, though there were still several months of training his eyes to work together. Imagine what it must have been like to see his mother's face. He had thought of it, he had felt it, but he could not see her. Imagine what it looked like to look out the window and see the clouds in the sky. Imagine what it would be like for David not only to hold, but to see his teddy bear for the first time. During his long convalescence, he became the love of the hospital staff and the doctors at that unit. Then on the day of his discharge, all of them gathered together in his room to bid him farewell. And David was sitting on the edge of his bed, clutching his teddy bear, when the eye surgeon who restored his sight came into the room for a last visit. The doctor appeared busy, as doctors often do. I sometimes suspect they're covering their emotions with their professionalism. It's not that they don't feel anything. But before the doctor could say anything, David spoke up and said, "Dr. John," whom he had learned to call him, said, I want to pay you for helping me." Helping me. My voice faded there with the me part. And then David handed him the battered old teddy bear, one of his dearest possessions. Dr. John took the teddy bear into his hand, accepting the gift, without argument, without reservation. Unless things have changed since we lived on Cape Cod and I visited people at Massachusetts General Hospital quite often, You can go to the 10th floor of the White Building, where there's one very special teddy bear in a glass case, a long-term resident there, complete with one ear seriously chewed, stuffing popping out of a side seam, with one eye missing. And underneath there's a plaque or some kind of a sign that says, "This is the highest fee I ever received for professional services rendered." Dr. John had given a gift of skill, expertise, and knowledge to a little boy David could see. Most like the leper story you read about. And David was so thankful, so grateful, that he offered to Dr. John his most treasured possession, his very best. What is it that moves us about this story? What is it that stirs and tugs at our hearts and inspires us with uplifting thoughts when we hear someone's generous giving of one's very best to others from a grateful heart? Given that story, would you agree that the prophet Isaiah, that something, or with him, that sometimes it is true that the example of a little child shall lead us? Thank you, David Livingstone, right? David Littleton. There's a David Livingstone, as some of you know. As I have stared at that teddy bear in Massachusetts General Hospital, I've tried to imagine the feelings of that young lad as he gave away to someone else in gratitude his prized possession. Have you ever had that experience where you felt so deeply grateful for something or someone in your life that you just wanted to give of your very best, and you did it? Perhaps in order to say I love you to somebody, perhaps to say I appreciate you, perhaps to say you are wonderful in my life, perhaps to say I believe in you. The Bible teaches us to live this way. That is, to give of our very best to further the will of God in the world. The Bible knows the secret. It's making it very clear and present to us. The idea of giving the very best of what we have to the service of God's will is an ancient insight that you read about in the book of Exodus. It says in the book of Exodus, chapter 23, "The choicest of the first fruits of your ground you shall bring into the house of the Lord your God." First fruits didn't mean to bring the leftovers after the best had been taken, but rather the opposite. In thanksgiving to God, who had given them all they had, including the harvest, they donated the cream of their crops. The best they had. Just as one example of this point, we all know that Jesus sat outside the temple treasury where a woman put in 2 copper coins, where people of great wealth were dumping in lots more quantity-wise. Because these were so precious to her, the best that she had, he considered of what tremendous value was her faith and her gift. Out of the faith and gratitude of her heart, she gave a huge proportion of what she had. We all have a built-in urge to collect. I confess. That's why we don't have an open house very often. We got a lot of cleaning that precedes your visit. It all ends up in our bed in the bedroom. The living room looks great. There's a deep joy and satisfaction in not just collecting. You see, we have an urge to collect, but we also have a deep spiritual need to give out of gratitude for the sake of others. As much as we all have the urge to collect, we also have that deep spiritual need to be needed, to find a place or project where we can give our lives and some of our best resources, our first fruits, the cream of the crop, if you will, toward the support of something we believe in. I agree with Bruce Barrett to preach a stewardship sermon today, and that's what this is. But it has a general message as well in all that we do. The total of all of our pledges together will give the Board of Stewards the information they need to put the finishing touches on a proposed budget for the year 2018. They do the best they can with what they hear back from us. And perhaps some of you received letters in the mail. If you didn't, because it's snail mail, you'll be getting it tomorrow or the next day. There's a little stewardship letter from Bruce representing our stewardship campaign in the fall. And there'll be a pledge card, or not the card, but it's printed on the second page, the bottom half of the, well, it's on the third page, I think. But it's in there. It's printed for you to return, if you can, to the church by mail, or even better, on Stewardship Sunday, which is December 3rd, the first Sunday of Advent. A wonderful day to express our thanksgiving. In closing, I'd like to share with you just a couple of thoughts. When I was at seminary, we were being taught in a course about stewardship in churches, and the professor said, people are funny about money. And now for about 49 years, where I've been a pastor that long, I have said that every year to a congregation. Every year. So I've said it 49 times. Not that many times, but it is consistent. People are funny about money. I am funny about money. We all are. 16 of 38 parables of Jesus deal with the stewardship of and use of money and possessions. In the Gospel, an unsettling 1 out of 10 verses focus directly on the subject of money. While the Bible offers about 500 verses on prayer, almost 500 verses on faith, it devotes over 2,000 verses on money and possessions. Must be important as a way of our giving of self to what we believe in. I suspect this has something to do with helping us to avoid the danger of our possessions possessing us. Part of King David's greatness was his realization that all that there is but a gift from God. That's what I was trying to say to the children this morning, earlier today. It's rather a gift on loan for our faithful use, whatever it be. It's not just here in the church, it's everywhere we are. What is the faithful use of what we have? The story I enjoy is about a preacher who stood before the congregation. We have all the money we need to fulfill the financial needs of our church to accomplish its work and mission. And everybody applauded with broad smiles, and then the pastor said, yes, indeed, we have all that we need. Now all we have to do is pledge it. So that is something that we kind of have as knowledge about ourselves without even knowing. Just as it says in Ephesians, as you and I together invite the Spirit of Christ to dwell in us richly and to be our guide in the present and into the future. And as we show that faith by giving our very best, the cream of the crop, to the support of God's Word, we can trust that God will take what we give and will, as the passage in Ephesians says, and will accomplish abundantly, far more than all we can ask or imagine. Those are the fruits of a faithful church. Can't wait to see what they are.